Every now and then, a movie is released into theaters that completely dominates the national zeitgeist. Jaws, The Exorcist, Star Wars, all of these didn't just impact pop culture, they were international phenomena that were all anyone talked about for months at a time. While other films have gone on to make more money and gain more critical acclaim, the release of Titanic in 1997 was one of those moments. My first job was working in a movie theater in Hilton Head, South Carolina, and I remember seeing the very first poster for the film. That is the most well-known poster, but this is the first glimpse I saw of the masterpiece that would cement James Cameron's place in cinematic history. For some reason, I can even tell you exactly where this poster was placed in the theater. There was a box office in the middle with doors on both sides, and that led you into the theater. Outside of those were two exits, and all of these doors were on the south side of the building. As you walked out of the left side of the box office, the poster was on the eastern wall just before the door exit. There was some hype surrounding the release of the film, but not a tremendous amount of hype, and it was still a time when the vast majority of anticipation around a theatrical release was generated by word of mouth. The budget for the movie had ballooned out of control, and since the film had shifted from summer to winter, everyone assumed it would be a failure. The opening Friday was nothing spectacular, but by Sunday, every single screening was sold out. This didn't just continue for a couple of weekends. This continued for 6 straight months. We had people coming through the doors, buying popcorn, and seeing Titanic over and over and over again. I saw the same people and tore the same tickets for the same movie for 6 months. That much overexposure caused a fair amount of backlash that negatively impacted the film. It was simply so much bigger than anything that had come before it that everyone was utterly exhausted by anything Titanic related. I understand that it's difficult to care about something after it's sucked all the air out of the room, and Titanic was a great example of something that became too big for its britches. It was 3 hours and 15 minutes long, which was insane at the time, and still considered too long today. In many ways, it's 2 movies at once. Cameron wanted to bring a human element to a subject he was very passionate about. So he took a real story about the sinking of the Titanic and laid that upon the foundation of a classic love story. So how does it hold up after all this time? Let's find out. Thank you so much for checking out the video. Before we get started, red subscribe button, notification bell, and let's go. Despite a myriad of issues with the film's production, Titanic didn't just defy studio expectations, it completely demolished them. Whatever concerns that Fox and Paramount had were rendered obsolete, and the money poured in. In addition to becoming, at the time, the highest grossing film in history, Titanic would go on to win a whopping 11 Oscars. The movie's spectacular reception was one thing, but the soundtrack did just as well. Celine Dion's gargantuan power ballad My Heart Will Go On immediately became the most successful song of the year. It topped the charts in 20 countries, sold over 18 million copies, and became the second best-selling single from a female artist in history. Much like the film itself, My Heart Will Go On was everywhere. It was playing on every radio station, in every grocery store, and also like the movie, it eventually wore out its welcome. It's been 24 years since Titanic sailed into theaters, and I haven't watched it in well over a decade. Let me get this out of the way. With the exception of the occasional bit of dated CGI, every single element of this movie is incredible. The performances are better than good across the board, from Leonardo DiCaprio to Kathy Bates to Billy Zane. There's not a single off-key moment during the entire thing. It also has so many fantastic little details that are easy to miss, and phenomenal character moments that feel perfectly natural. As good as this movie is, and I don't know how I didn't appreciate this before, Kate Winslet completely dominates this movie. James Cameron has always done a great job with strong female leads, and 2 of the greatest action heroes are women that were directed by Cameron, Sarah Connor from Terminator, and Ellen Ripley from Alien and Aliens. That continues here in every way. Winslet's Rose DeWitt Bukater legitimately has one of the very best character arcs I've ever seen. She deals with issues of class, a woman's place in the world, and escaping a man's grasp to forge her own way forward. It's genuine, honest, real, and in no way does it ever feel like it's preaching to the audience. It's remarkable how great she is in this, and it's a bit surprising that she didn't win the Oscar for Best Actress despite being nominated. Wait, did I just say it's surprising? Oh, wait. Of course it's not surprising. The Oscars are trash. In addition to the principal cast, Titanic is littered with historical figures and famous crew members. John Jacob Astor IV and Benjamin Guggenheim are here, and both of them died on the Titanic. First Officer William Murdoch, Captain Edward Smith, White Star Line's managing director J. Bruce Ismay, and shipbuilder Thomas Andrews all have major parts to play. The fact that Winslet manages to stand head and shoulders above all of them is a testament to her ferocious dedication to the role. The love story was often the most criticized thing about Titanic, and I personally believe it holds up well enough. The chemistry between the two leads is both palpable and believable, with Rose's desperation to break away from a relationship she doesn't want, both sharpening her character and forming new bonds with a man she grows to love. Leo is really good as Jack Dawson, and he has just the right amount of wit and charm needed to keep up with Rose. They have numerous great moments together, like when Jack drags Rose into the bowels of the ship to party with third class. She takes some time to get going, but eventually finds herself not just fitting in, but upstaging the guys repeatedly. It's adorable in all of the right ways and does such a great job of keeping the story upbeat and engaging. There are moments in the middle of this movie where you almost forget that you know what's coming. As I'm sure you're aware, eventually that revelry wears off just as Rose and Jack hit their stride, with an iceberg striking the ship's starboard hull and sending the two lovebirds to their tragic fates. The back half of Titanic immediately turns the film into a disaster epic, with realization slowly setting in as Andrews explains that it's a mathematical certainty that the ship will sink. These moments are both powerful and impactful. Ismay scoffs in disbelief, harumph, this ship cannot sink, and Captain Smith quietly understands his own personal responsibility for pushing the ship too far. There's no finger pointing, there's not some big brawl where everyone fights over who should be blamed. There's some anger, but mostly sorrow as the men begin to understand the gravity of their situation. How exactly these conversations actually occurred is up for debate, and after all, Titanic is still a Hollywood film. That back end of the movie is obviously loaded with most of the action. Women and children go in the lifeboats first, men try to bribe their way to safety, and the band continues to play as water creeps further and further up the ship. All of this leads up to that climactic moment where this massive iron monument to excess disappears beneath the surface of the ocean. Technically, it's amazing. The sheer number of things happening at once is a sight to be seen. Cameron's decision to build a giant replica of the Titanic and then sink it looks awesome. Relying this heavily on practical effects was a necessity given the state of computer-generated imagery in 1997. The fact that Titanic was filmed when it was means that you can only do so much with computers, and actually dumping your actors into the freezing water brings a sense of realism you can feel. That abrupt turn from love story to disaster isn't nearly as jarring as I remembered, and it's handled as well as possible. I made a handful of bullet point notes that I want to discuss before I wrap this thing up with a big picture look at Titanic. The actress who plays this Irish lady is the same actress who plays John Connor's foster mom in Terminator 2, and somehow this is the first time I noticed it. There's a moment after the iceberg collision where Andrews is wandering around on the main staircase. Rose can tell that something is very wrong, and she quietly taps him on the shoulder. She asks him to tell her the truth because she can already see it in his eyes. It's one of my favorite moments in the entire thing, and I was struck by how much it moved me. Billy Zane does a great job as Rose's douche-turd fiance Cal. What the hell kind of name is Cal? Sorry if you're watching this and your name is Cal. I'm on the fence about whether or not Leo would have survived on the door. He could have definitely fit on top of it, but the weight might have been too much. Nobody can really know for sure. Speaking of the door, that dialogue scene goes on for way too long. Feels a little forced, and is the only part of the movie I didn't like. Cameron's dedication to using physical sets should be commended, and his ability to stage massive scenes with hundreds of extras is underrated. The script is better than most people give it credit for. My Heart Will Go On is a great song. It was overplayed, but it's still a great song. If you don't like it, go cry me a river. This guy right here, Spicer Lovejoy, that's a really cool name. But isn't his face just so punchable? Nobody talks about Victor Garber's performance as Thomas Andrews, and it's a real shame. I don't care what any of the haters or detractors say. Titanic is a great movie, anchored by excellent acting, a once-in-a-lifetime performance by Kate Winslet, a solid script, world-class practical effects, a perfect score by James Horner, and a love story that's not anywhere close to as bad as you remember. If you haven't seen it in a while, which I imagine most people haven't, consider looking back at one of the biggest and most important films in cinema history. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the review or you found it helpful, please consider subscribing. You can also like and share the video since that tells YouTube it's worth promoting. Go down in the comments, let me know what you think of Titanic, and I'll see you next Wednesday at 9 a.m.